Welcome back, guys. In today's episode, I'm sharing 8 true, disturbing stories about road trips through the Appalachian backroads. One man followed a girl into the woods to help her brother and found the boy hanging upside down, already dead. And another woke up to find greasy handprints on the outside of their car and realized they hadn't been alone. So make sure to hit that like and subscribe button, share this with your friends, and let me know where you're watching from. Thanks. Now let's get into it. I was 22 when my cousin Jonah showed up in my driveway with this loud mustard yellow camper van that looked like it had survived 3 road trips and a small fire. He bought it off Craigslist from a guy named Chuck, who met him in a Tractor Supply parking lot and insisted it had character. The roof sagged in the middle, the side mirror was duct taped on, and you had to hit the dashboard twice, and only twice, to get the air conditioning to kick in. Jonah called it an adventure tank, like that made up for everything. I didn't even want to go on the trip. I had a job interview lined up the next week, and I was broke. But Jonah had been planning this since college, and his friend Miles, plus Miles's girlfriend Haley, were already on board. They were all hyped. I didn't want to be the one who stayed behind, so I said yes. That was the whole reason. I told myself it'd be a short break, one of those things you do in your 20s to say you did it. We left from just outside Akron and started heading south. No set route, no real plan, just vague ideas about seeing the Appalachians, cutting through the Smokies, and eventually ending up somewhere west, probably Colorado. The van didn't have working GPS, so we mostly used Jonah's phone taped to the dashboard with painter's tape. First few days were pretty standard. Back roads, sketchy gas stations, sleeping in the van at rest stops. We hit one diner that served coffee and chipped mugs and had a photo of a possum in a tuxedo hanging above the register. It was weirdly charming. Then we crossed into West Virginia. That's when Jonah brought up Dogwood Pass. He'd found some half-baked post in a forum thread about urban legends. Someone had uploaded a screenshot of a comment from like 2016. No actual article, just a blurry photo of what looked like a rusted gate in the woods next to an overgrown trail. The comment said something about it being a lost mining town, but there was no real info, just a name, Dogwood Pass, some coordinates, and a bunch of broken links. Naturally, Jonah wanted to check it out. Come on, he said. It's probably just some collapsed shack or something. Yeah, we were already kind of nearby, and I think he was getting bored with all the scenic overlooks and antique stores, so yeah, we went. We left the main road around 3 p.m., took a series of turns that got more questionable the deeper we got. First pavement, then cracked asphalt, then gravel that didn't really count as a road anymore. Jonah kept saying, "It's just up ahead," even though the GPS had stopped updating 20 minutes earlier. The deeper we went, the less everything felt current. No birds, no traffic, just the sound of the van rattling like something was loose underneath. We came up on this wooden sign nailed between 2 posts. Dogwood Pass in faded white paint. And at the bottom, carved deep and jagged into the wood, "Run." We all saw it. Nobody said anything. Haley looked like she was ready to bolt, but Jonah just drove right past. The road beyond the sign wasn't really a road at all. It was a path through trees, way too narrow, packed with loose rocks and broken glass, like somebody had abandoned a junkyard in the woods. The trees on either side grew in too close, like unnaturally close, like they'd been forced that way. Finally, we rolled into this wide clearing. It had a burned-out fire pit, some broken-down folding chairs, and what looked like the rusted remains of a tent pole. Everything was scattered like whoever had been there last left in a hurry. Jonah turned off the van and said, "Perfect spot to crash." Haley said, "We're not staying here." Her voice was flat, no edge, just certainty. Jonah laughed. "It's fine. We'll make a fire, take some creepy photos for Haley's Instagram, and leave in the morning." She didn't answer. I glanced at Miles, who just shrugged. I didn't want to be the one to say it felt wrong, even though it did. I kept quiet. We built a fire with some branches and leftover scrap wood Jonah had tossed in with the spare tire. It caught quick. We passed around a plastic bottle of whiskey and roasted whatever we could dig out of the cooler. Jonah tried to start ghost stories. Haley stayed quiet, just watching the tree line, like she was expecting something to crawl out of it. Around midnight, I got up to grab more firewood from the pile behind the van. That's when I heard it. Footsteps. Crunching. Steady. 4 of them. Then, nothing. I froze. The kind of freeze where even your breathing stops. Miles stood up and turned on his phone flashlight, swinging the beam toward the noise. Probably a raccoon, Jonas said. But his tone had shifted. We all listened. Then again. Crunch. Crunch. Haley stood and backed up toward the van. Miles followed her without saying a word. Jonah grabbed a rock and hurled it into the woods. It hit something with a metallic clang. Not a tree. Not the ground. Something solid. Then Haley gasped and pointed. At the far edge of the clearing, there was something. Someone? Standing between 2 trees. Tall, way too tall, thin. Its skin looked smooth and pale, and its face wasn't there. Just a blank oval shape. No eyes, no mouth, no nose. Like someone stretched skin over a mannequin head. It didn't move. Then it stepped forward. Jonah dropped the bottle. Miles grabbed Haley by the wrist. I didn't move. Couldn't. It tilted its head to the side. Same angle as mine. When I shifted my foot, it did the same. Not like mocking, more like copying. Then the headlights of the van kicked on, and behind the thing, dozens more, all identical, lined up perfectly, spaced out in rows like mannequins in a department store window. Not moving, not blinking. Jonas screamed, snapped out of it, dove for the keys. That jolted me. I ran to the van, yanked open the side door. We piled in, slammed it shut, and Jonah floored it in reverse. The van lurched, tires spitting dirt as we tore back down the path. Every corner felt like we were going to flip. Branches scraped the sides, and for one awful second, I thought I saw one of them in the mirror. But I didn't look back. Not once. We drove in dead silence. Nobody spoke. The only sound was the tires humming, and Jonah breathing too hard. Eventually, we hit pavement again. We didn't know where we were. The gas light had been on for miles, and we hadn't seen another car or house or anything. Then, finally, a glow ahead. One old gas station at a crossroads, with a single flickering pump under a busted yellow light. Jonah pulled in. I offered to pump just to get out of the van. The moment I stepped out, I felt it. That pressure, like someone was staring at me from behind my eyes. I kept my head down, focused on the numbers ticking on the pump. Then I heard tapping. From inside the gas station, tap, tap, tap. I looked up. The windows were filthy. Inside was empty shells knocked over, thick dust, no lights. Then the pump light went out. Complete darkness. The tapping stopped. In the reflection of the window, something behind me moved. I turned fast. Nothing, Jonah shouted from inside the van. I dropped the nozzle, jumped in, slammed the door, and we peeled out. Tires squealed. We didn't stop. By dawn, we made it to a visitor center near the Virginia border. People were hiking, walking dogs, taking photos, like everything was fine. We found a motel, checked in, didn't say anything. This was late September, right after everything kind of fell apart for all 3 of us. Dan's relationship exploded, like police calling, key in the car kind of exploded. Alex got laid off from his job at the print shop with 0 warning, and I was burned out enough to fake a stomach ulcer just to get a few days to breathe. None of us had a plan. We just threw some clothes into backpacks, grabbed gas station snacks, and pointed Dan's beat-up Civic south out of Columbus. We figured we'd follow back roads until we stopped thinking. Officially, we told people we were going to see the fall foliage. Unofficially, we were just trying to outrun the parts of our lives that felt like they were caving in. By the time we hit the Tennessee line, we'd slept in 2 weird motels. One had a water stain on the ceiling shaped like a screaming face, and somehow ended up at a roadside Bigfoot museum that charged $5 to look at plaster casts of real prints. Dan loved it. Alex pretended to be annoyed but took more pictures than any of us. We ate Waffle House twice in the same day and bought boiled peanuts from a guy who might have been asleep standing up. Honestly, it felt good just being away from home. Useless, but good. Dan was driving that afternoon. We'd just come down a long ridge, coasting into this nameless valley with nothing but trees in every direction. Trees so thick on both sides it felt like we were inside something, not outside. The GPS froze mid-curve, right before we passed a handmade wooden sign. Anti-cakes, cold drinks, baked goods, painted in peeling red letters. An arrow pointed left onto a barely there gravel path. Dan turned without even asking. "Old lady with moon pies, guaranteed," he said. The road was a tunnel of branches. Some brushed against the car hard enough to make snapping sounds. Alex ducked instinctively when a branch smacked the windshield, even though it didn't actually crack it. I remember thinking the trees were too close. Like if we stopped, they'd close in and take the car. Maybe a quarter-mile in, the woods opened into a wide clearing. Sitting dead center was a red clapboard house, big porch, sagging in the middle, covered in stuff. Wooden crates, glass bottles, rusted tools, piles of old books. It didn't look abandoned, just forgotten. There were no other cars, no lights, no smoke, nothing moving. I said, "Pretty sure they're not open." Dan was already halfway out of the car. "We're just browsing. Don't be soft." Alex followed. Neither of them hesitated. I stayed in the passenger seat for another second, watching the porch. Something felt off. The rocking chair was moving, just a little, but steady. Nobody sitting in it. No breeze either. I rolled down my window just to check. The air was still. Still, I got out. Didn't want to be the guy who chickened out and waited alone. We stepped onto the porch and right away I started noticing the strange details. The jars on the shelves weren't for decoration. One had a coiled up snake floating in yellow liquid. Another held a bird with a third leg sticking out of its chest. A mason jar near the screen door was packed with buttons and teeth. The teeth weren't from any animal I could name. Human. Some with fillings. I took a step back, stomach flipping. Dan knocked anyway. The screen door creaked open just from the tap. It hadn't been latched. "Hello?" he called out. "Saw the sign. You open?" Silence. Then, slowly, the inside door moved. Just a few inches, like someone pushed it from behind and walked away. I opened my mouth to say, "Let's not." But Dan was already stepping through. Alex glanced at me once, then followed him. I didn't want to be the last one outside, so I went in. It smelled like vinegar and something spoiled, maybe meat. My nose crinkled before I even hit the doorway. The air inside felt weird, thick in a way that had nothing to do with heat or dust. Shelves lined the walls, stacked with more cloudy jars. Some filled with dark liquid, others dry with curled up things inside. A dead cuckoo clock hung above a curtained doorway. On a nearby table sat 3 eyeless dolls with stitched grins. Above them on the wall, 5 rifles were mounted in a row. Underneath, a cross-stitched sign read, "Blessed are they who suffer." Dan walked straight toward the far wall like he'd done this 100 times. He pointed at one of the black and white photographs tacked to the boards. "Yo, look at this." I came closer. The photo showed 6 men in old hunting gear standing around a large mound. At first I assumed it was deer, but the longer I looked, the more details clicked into place. An arm, fingers, hair tangled around something, a foot twisted at a bad angle. It wasn't deer. Alex was behind us now. He spoke almost under his breath. "That's not a deer pile." The wooden floor above us creaked. One step, slow, heavy. Dan looked toward the staircase in the corner, half curved and shadowy. "Probably a raccoon. Raccoons don't weigh 200 pounds, I said. Then came a dragging sound. Long. Like something big being pulled across the floorboards. I started backing up. Dan didn't move. "Let's go," I said, my voice cracking a little. Dan tilted his head like he was listening for something. What if someone's hurt? Or just old and can't move well? Another step, closer to the top of the stairs. Alex started moving toward the door. They can call 911. I'm not doing this. We were almost to the porch when something upstairs hit the floor with a solid, echoing thud. Not a step, a drop. Something fell or jumped. Dan didn't wait. He ran. Start the car, he yelled. I was right behind him. He jammed the key into the ignition. I turned it. Nothing. He tried again. Still dead. The third time, the engine coughed and sputtered. For a second, I thought it would stall again. Then it roared. Dan gunned it, and we tore out of there, gravel flying behind us. No one said a word. No one looked back. We drove for maybe half an hour. Trees, curves, shadows, nothing familiar. Eventually, Dan spoke. There was someone up there. Alex said, we saw the picture. That was already too much. No, Dan said. I mean in the window. When we pulled out, I saw a face. Hadn't looked. I couldn't bring myself to. Eventually, we found a bait shop near a park entrance. Inside, it smelled like minnows and dirt. The guy behind the counter looked like he'd been chiseled out of stone. Scar on his lip, knuckles covered in old scabs. Dan told him everything. The jars, the porch, the photo. The man stared at him for a long second. Then he said, that place up past mile marker 18? Porch full of glass? Dan nodded. You went inside? Dan said, yeah. Man didn't say anything, just bent down, grabbed a small paper bag and handed it over the counter. Inside was beef jerky. Dan frowned. We didn't buy anything. The man didn't blink. Take it and go. That night, back at our motel, none of us could sleep. We didn't even try, just lay there staring at the ceiling or scrolling our phones without really seeing anything. That photo wouldn't leave me. The bodies, but worse than that, the expressions on those hunters' faces. They weren't solemn. They looked proud, like they'd caught something rare. We left before the sun came up. Nobody said anything to the front desk. We didn't talk until we were well past Asheville. At a gas station outside town, Dan popped the trunk. That's when I saw the smudges. 4 handprints, greasy, grime-smudged, just faint enough to miss unless the light hit right. 1 on the trunk, 2 on the rear windows, 1 by the gas cap. They hadn't been there the day before. We'd have seen them. Dan wiped them off without a word. We didn't bring it up again. I was 32 that summer. I decided to take the long way to Braxton. My cousin Jesse was getting married up in the mountains, and after everything that had happened, I needed a reason to get out of my own head. I'd just gotten laid off from the factory. 6 years on the line, and the whole place shut down overnight. They handed us checks like they were giving out coupons. Just like that, the thing I'd planned to build my life around was gone. The day after, I cleaned out my locker, came home, and just stood in my kitchen with the fridge door open, not even looking at anything. It wasn't hunger I was feeling, just that weird numbness that settles in when something big disappears and you don't quite know what you're supposed to do next. So when my mom called and reminded me about Jesse's wedding, I told her I'd be there. I didn't tell her I wasn't taking the interstate. I needed a change of pace, something quieter, something different. I wanted the drive to mean something. I packed a duffel, filled my old thermos with gas station coffee that tasted like it had been brewed last week, and grabbed my dad's old road atlas. No GPS. I told myself I wanted the scenery, but really, I just didn't want a voice telling me where to go. I wanted to figure it out on my own. I pulled out of Somerset at 5 in the morning, hit the 2-lane roads, and by noon I was deep in the Blue Ridge. The landscape started changing in ways I couldn't quite explain. The hills weren't just hills anymore. They felt sharper, like the land had bones that were poking through the skin. The trees leaned in too close. You know how sometimes the woods are peaceful? These woods weren't that. Sounds got fewer and farther between. Some didn't even have names on the signs, just hand-painted arrows pointing to gravel roads. I stopped at this gas station in a place called Mill Creek. You wouldn't find it on any map unless you already knew it was there. The place had a leaning roof, a flickering Coke machine out front, and a mural on the side that looked like it had been done by someone who wasn't sure what trains actually looked like. Inside, the clerk was this guy who looked like he'd seen some things. Gray beard, wiry arms, eyes that followed you like you might try to steal something, even if all you were buying was beef jerky and a Gatorade. "You heading south?" he asked, glancing at my plate. "Yeah, Braxton." He nodded once. "Don't drive past sundown." Just like that, like he was telling me not to leave food out for raccoons. I kind of chuckled, waiting for him to crack a smile. He didn't. I said thanks, got back in my truck and drove on. About 30 minutes later, I came to a fork that wasn't marked on the atlas. The right path looked almost swallowed by the woods. Pavement broken, moss growing through the cracks, like it hadn't seen a car in years, which of course made it more interesting. I took it. The road narrowed quick, trees pressed in from both sides. Radio died to static, then silence. My phone had no bars. The pavement turned to gravel, then dirt. I had to slow way down just to avoid bottoming out. Then I saw her. She was just there, middle of the road. Not waving, not moving, just standing still with her arm raised like she was trying to hitch a ride through nowhere. I slowed down and rolled the window halfway. "You all right?" She nodded. "My brother's stuck. We need help getting him down." Her voice was calm. Too calm. Not panicked or upset. Just flat. "Down from what?" She turned and walked straight into the woods without answering. I sat there for a second, hand still on the wheel. Every instinct told me not to follow. But she didn't look dangerous. She looked like someone who needed help. And I couldn't just drive off knowing there might be a kid hurt out there. So I parked, locked the truck out of habit, and went after her. The woods swallowed us fast. She moved like she knew every root and low branch. I had to duck, sidestep, fight through brush just to keep her in sight. The air got heavy, thick with this damp smell like wet leaves and rust. No birds, no bugs. Just the sound of me breathing louder and louder, the further in we went. Then we reached this small ravine, and that's where I saw the boy. He was hanging upside down from a tree, one leg caught in a tangle of thick vines. His arms dangled, limp. His shirt had bunched up near his chest, and his head tilted at an angle I've never seen outside of a car crash. I stepped closer, thinking I could help him down, but then I saw his eyes. They were wide open, glassy, no blinking, and his face, his skin wasn't right. It wasn't just pale, it was wrong, gray, flat, like whatever made him human had drained out. "He's dead," I said without thinking. I turned back to the woman. She was gone. No sound, no footsteps, just gone. I stood there, turning in slow circles, trying to find any sign of her. Nothing but bark and brush and trees that all looked the same. I didn't run, not yet. I just started moving in what I hoped was the direction we came from. After maybe 10 minutes of bushwhacking and panic breathing, I hit the road again. But my truck wasn't there. Instead, there was a building. One story. Wood slats warped and mismatched. No windows. A door that looked like it had been pried open and nailed shut more than once. Above it, a sign with the letters carved clean off. Just scratches where words used to be. It looked like a church built out of leftover nightmares. I didn't want to go near it, but I had no phone, no ride, no clue where I was. And the woods weren't exactly rolling out a welcome mat either. I went in. The inside smelled like damp dirt and rusted tools. The floor was just packed soil. There was a stone slab in the middle, stained dark in ways I didn't want to analyze. Candles burned in all four corners. Fresh wax, freshly lit. Then I felt breath on the back of my neck. I turned fast. There was a man in the doorway. Bare feet, overalls, long beard. Eyes pale and cloudy, like he was born without pupils. "I'm lost," I told him, backing up. "I don't want trouble." He stepped forward. I stepped back. Two more people emerged. From where, I don't know. the woman, and the boy. Only now he was standing, and taller, and his head still hung at that weird angle, like it didn't belong to him. They didn't speak, didn't move much, just watched me, like I was exactly where they wanted me to be. I ran, shoved the man aside, ducked past the boy's reaching hand, and bolted through the door. Didn't care where I was going, just away. Branches tore at my clothes, my arms bled. I tripped over a root, smacked my knee hard on a rock, but I didn't stop. After what felt like hours, I broke out of the trees and hit gravel. Real road. Just as I thought my chest would cave in, headlights hit me. I waved both arms like I was signaling a plane. An old pickup screeched to a stop. Rust everywhere. Woman inside looked like someone's grandma, except for the shotgun across her lap. "You lost?" she asked, barely glancing at me. "There's something back there," I gasped. "People or things. I don't know. A kid hanging." He was already in. She didn't ask anything else, just drove. Took me back to Mill Creek, dropped me at the motel like it was routine. I didn't ask questions either. I left before dawn, got on the highway, and didn't stop until I saw a city sign. Didn't eat, didn't pee, didn't breathe right until I was miles from anything with trees. I filed a report about the truck. Cops looked confused. Said there was no road like the one I described. No missing kid, no abandoned building. They did a sweep of the area. Came back with nothing. We weren't even supposed to be in Kentucky. The plan was to stay on the main highways, avoid any sketchy detours, and hit Asheville by midnight. Jason had this whole route printed out, even though we all had phones. He's old school like that. But after lunch at this grimy little truck stop, I knocked out in the passenger seat. One of those food coma naps where you blink and suddenly it's been an hour. When I opened my eyes, the world outside had changed. Jason was driving like everything was normal. Arm propped out the window, tapping the wheel like he was listening to a song. Except the road didn't match anything from earlier. The pavement looked decades old, cracked, uneven, patches of grass coming through. No road markings, no signs, just dense forest creeping in tight on both sides, like we weren't supposed to be there. I looked at him and said, "Where the hell are we?" He didn't even glance over, just said, "Shortcut. GPS says it saves 20 minutes. That's when I knew something was off. Jason doesn't trust GPS. He'll use it for backup, sure, but he always follows his printed directions. He even triple-checked them before we left. In the back, Elena stirred. She'd been asleep the whole time, earbuds in, hoodie pulled over her face. She sat up, squinting out the window like she was trying to make sense of what she was seeing, then said, "Why does it feel like we're going backwards?" I laughed. Not because it was funny, I just didn't know what else to do. None of us had a signal. Every phone said no service. Even the radio just gave us static. I tried scanning through stations, nothing. No music, no talk, not even emergency broadcasts. It was like we dropped off the map. The silence stretched. The tires made this low hum on the rough pavement, and that was it. It started to feel like we weren't driving toward anything, just through something. Then we rounded this sharp bend and saw it, a white sedan, parked sideways, blocking the whole road. The front end had crumpled into a tree, no lights on, no engine noise, no one inside that we could see. It looked like it had been there a while, but there wasn't any damage around it. No broken branches, no torn up ground. Jason slowed the car, stopped a few yards short. "What the hell?" he said, quiet. None of us moved for a second. Then I opened my door and stepped out. It was dead silent. Not quiet like a peaceful forest hike, quiet like a vacuum. No birds, no wind, nothing. I could hear my heartbeat and the faint ringing in my ears. I walked up to the sedan. The driver's side door was open. Inside, there was a purse on the floor, an old phone on the seat with a cracked screen, and both airbags had deployed. No blood, no broken glass, just bare footprints in the dirt leading from the open door into the woods. I looked at them for a second, then I stepped into the trees, just far enough to follow. Maybe 10 feet in, I heard it. Running. Not stomping or crashing, just fast, light footfalls, circling. Like someone was moving just out of sight, not trying to hide, but not showing themselves either. I froze. My eyes scanned the trees, trying to catch movement. Nothing. When I turned around, the car looked farther away than it should have been. And the trail I'd just walked? Gone. No footprints, no disturbed grass, just forest. I didn't wait. I ran back to the road. I told them what I saw. Jason said maybe whoever crashed was concussed, or high, or both. Elena kept staring into the woods like she expected someone to walk out. We couldn't call for help. We had no choice but to keep moving. I wrote a quick note, folded it and tucked it under the wiper blade on the sedan. Saw your car, no one inside, went for help, something like that. We drove around it and kept going. The road got worse, narrower. Trees started to close in, branches overhead forming this kind of tunnel. It felt like the world was folding in on us. Still no signs, no other cars, no buildings. Just this endless, green corridor. That's when we saw the first sign, just a wooden plank nailed to a tree. White paint, smeared and drippy, like it had been slapped on in a hurry. It read, "Stop while you still can." Jason snorted. Someone's idea of a haunted corn maze. About 10 minutes later, another one. This time on a rusted metal post. He sees who leaves. Elena leaned forward. Sees who leaves what? Neither of us answered. Then we saw the third. Painted on an old oil drum. Don't follow the music. Jason started slowing down. The road hadn't changed, but something about it felt heavier. Elena pulled her hoodie up again and shrunk into the seat like she was trying to disappear. Then we heard it. Humming, a woman's voice off in the trees. Low, soft, almost too quiet to be real. Just 3 notes, repeating, over and over. No words, just that slow, dragging hum. Jason turned the radio off. We all listened. I cracked my window a little. The sound didn't get louder, but it didn't fade either, just stayed there, like it was following us. Then we came to this clearing. String lights were strung low between the trees, sagging a little in the middle. Underneath was a weathered wooden sign, Church of the Last Night. There was a dirt path behind it, curving sharply downhill into darkness. None of us said anything. Jason didn't slow down, we just kept moving. 10 minutes later, we saw a house. 1 story, wooden siding, no driveway. Just sitting in the woods with a single porch light flickering yellow. No sound, no movement, but someone was in the window, just standing there, pale face, motionless, staring out like they'd been waiting for us to pass. Elena whispered, "It's fake, a mannequin or something." I didn't even look away from the road. "Keep going." Jason didn't say a word. The forest thickened. I couldn't tell if the sun was going down or if the trees were just blocking out all the light. Then the humming came back. Except it wasn't humming anymore. It was a violin, slow, steady notes. Not a song, just sound. Too precise to be recorded, too fluid. It followed us. We all turned our heads at the same time toward the left. There was nothing. No movement, no light, just trees. But the music didn't fade. It matched our speed like it was walking alongside us. Then something stepped onto the road. Jason slammed the brakes. We skidded, spun a little, stopped sideways across both lanes. But there was nothing there. It was white, tall, limbs all wrong, like they bent the wrong way. It stepped out from the trees and vanished before it even hit the headlights. None of us spoke. Jason turned the car around. We didn't debate it, we just drove. And then we passed the white sedan again. Same spot, same crash, like we'd looped. But the note we'd left? Gone. Jason didn't even react. He just floored it. We started flying through turns like we were running from something. Trees blurred past, the violin music kept up, never louder, never quieter, just there. Then Elena screamed. I spun around. There was someone sitting in the back seat next to her. White face. No eyes. Skin stretched tight. black symbols etched into their neck and chest, and a grin, wide, too wide. Then nothing, gone, like they'd never been there. Jason, eventually we saw lights, a gas station, real civilization. He pulled in hard, parked, and we just sat there. 5 full minutes. No one moved, no one spoke, just breathing. Jason flew home the next morning. He wouldn't talk about it, just said something came back with us. Elena hasn't mentioned the trip since. My cousin Nate and I had this long-running thing. We'd talk about taking a spontaneous road trip. No set destination, no schedule, no hotel reservations. Just pack up and go. We always said we'd do it someday, but life got in the way. Jobs, relationships, bills. You know how it is. Then one random Tuesday afternoon, my phone buzzed. It was Nate. All he said was, "Let's do something weird, like haunted weird. Appalachian Trail. I've been reading about disappearances, ghost towns, all that creepy stuff. Let's just go find something messed up." I kinda laughed. What, like go hunting ghosts in the woods? Yeah, why not? Thing is, I wasn't in a great place at the time. My relationship had crashed and burned about 2 months before, and I hadn't really come up for air since. I was going through the motions at work, showing up late, leaving early, sleeping till noon most days, eating garbage, ignoring most of my texts. I wasn't exactly thriving. So when Nate said, "Let's go," something in me just said yes. "I'll drive," I told him. Friday morning, that was it. We packed way too much stuff. Tents, sleeping bags, coolers full of junk food, a propane stove I hadn't used in years. I threw in a couple old tarps, and Nate brought a hatchet he insisted we might need. For chopping firewood, he claimed, but I think he just liked the idea of having it. We didn't map out the route, no plan. The only idea was to follow the Appalachian Trail south, hit back roads, and stop whenever something gave us that weird feeling. The first few days were actually pretty fun. We hiked short trails, slept in the back of the truck, found little gas stations with dusty candy racks and old Coke machines. Nights were spent trying to scare each other with stories from Reddit. Nate had this one about a guy who heard something calling his name from inside a cave, but when he went in, he found another version of himself already standing there. He told it with this deadpan voice that made it creepier somehow. By the 4th day, we were somewhere in western North Carolina. The GPS had glitched earlier and rerouted us off the main road. We were cutting through some mountain foothills when Nate suddenly pointed and yelled, "Stop! Back up!" I slammed the brakes and reversed maybe 20 feet. He was already out of the truck by the time I stopped. There, almost swallowed by thick brush and vines, was this old rusted sign, "Devil's Elbow, 11 Me." The paint was cracked and faded, bullet holes in the corners. Not listed on any map we'd checked, not even the old paper atlas Nate kept just in case. "This," he said grinning, "is exactly what we're looking for." The road off that turn was terrible. Gravel gave way to broken stone, then to what honestly looked like a dried-up creek bed. The truck bounced so much I thought we'd snap something underneath. Trees closed in tight overhead, branches clawing at the sides. It got darker fast, even though it was barely afternoon. By mile 2, we had zero signal, no bars, no GPS, just us, the truck, and whatever the hell Devil's Elbow was. We weren't even nervous. If anything, we were finally getting what we came for. Around mile 11, the trail widened into a flat clearing next to a dry creek. Just dirt, rocks, and silence. No signs of life, no houses, no mailboxes, no tire tracks. We figured it was as good a place as any to camp. We set up the tent, made a small fire with what dry wood we could find, and ate some canned chili straight out of the pot. As night came on, the place got quiet. Not just rural quiet. No birds, no wind, not even the usual nighttime bugs. Just us and the occasional pop from the fire. We tried to scare each other again. Nate told a story about a ranger who followed footprints deep into the woods and found they suddenly turned into claw marks. I countered with one about people getting lost in national parks and their voices being heard days later, echoing across trails they were never on. By around 11 p.m., I was exhausted. Nate, though, was still wired. "I'm gonna check out that path over there," he said, pointing off past the tree line. I thought he was joking. "Dude, really? In the dark?" He shrugged. "I'll take the flashlight. Just want to see where it goes." I told him to wait till morning. He promised he'd be quick. I stayed by the fire, throwing small sticks into the flames and watching the shadows twitch along the treetops. 10 minutes passed, then 20, then 30. I called out. No answer. I stood up, grabbed my flashlight, and headed in the direction he'd gone. The path curved into the woods and disappeared fast. Every step I took echoed more than it should have. I could hear my own breathing too clearly. After a while, I saw something on the ground up ahead. His flashlight, still on, lying in the dirt. The beam was aimed up a slope at this low mound, covered in moss and leaves. Something about it felt off. The ground around it looked lighter, loose. I knelt and pressed my fingers into the dirt. It crumbled too easily, like it had just been moved. No roots, no compacted earth, just soft soil. "Nate?" I called again. "This isn't funny, man." I stood up and turned, and he was just there, standing right behind me on the trail. He said, "Hey, man," casual, like we bumped into each other at a grocery store. I jumped. "Where the hell did you go?" "Just checking stuff out," he said. He was smiling, but something in his face didn't sit right. The smile was too stiff, his eyes too wide. He looked like Nate, but kind of like someone doing an impression of him. We walked back without talking. At the fire, he just sat there, staring at the flames. I asked again what he saw out there. He shrugged. "Not much, just forest." I told him I found his flashlight on the ground. He frowned. "I didn't drop it. I said it was half buried," pointing at some weird little mound. He looked at me like I was the one acting strange. "You must have seen someone else's." That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in the tent, eyes wide open, listening. His breathing didn't sound like sleep. It was too shallow, too even, like he was pretending. Just before dawn, I crawled out. A minute later, he unzipped the tent and stepped out, all cheerful. "Coffee?" he asked. I stared at him. "We didn't bring coffee." He paused, just for a second. "Oh, right." That was it for me. I told him we should pack up and head into town. Maybe grab a motel for a night, take a real shower. He agreed too quickly. The drive out felt completely different. The road looked the same, but everything felt tighter. The trees seemed closer. Branches scraped the truck in places they hadn't before. It felt like we were being pushed out. As soon as we hit paved road, I pulled into the first gas station I saw. A tiny place with a diner attached. I told Nate I needed the bathroom. Inside, I found the waitress and asked if they had a phone I could use. She handed me the receiver without question. I called my mom, told her I needed her to come get me, 3 hours away. Didn't give much detail, just said Nate was acting weird and I didn't want to drive home alone. When I went back out, I told Nate the truck was overheating. He looked at me for a long second, then nodded. "Guess I'll wait with it." We sat in the diner for over an hour. I sipped water. He didn't eat or drink anything. Just watched people come and go, eyes always on the door. Eventually, I told him I was going to walk over and find a mechanic. He just watched me leave. I didn't go to a mechanic. I walked to the edge of town, found a bench at the bus stop, and sat there until my mom's car pulled up. I got in, closed the door, and told her, "Just go." 2 days later, I called Nate. No answer. A week after that, his sister called me. "Kev," she said, "when was the last time you actually saw Nate?" I said, "About a week ago, Devil's Elbow." She went quiet. "Kev," she said finally, "Nate's missing. Has been for 3 weeks. He never left New York." I just froze. "That's not possible. I picked him up. We camped." "No." He never responded to our texts. His car's still in his garage. Cops think he just disappeared. After we hung up, I opened my phone, scrolled to the photo I took that first day. Nate standing beside the truck, smiling. It looked like him, but the eyes were wrong, and the smile was too wide. I never went back for the truck. Called the local sheriff and told them to keep it. Didn't explain why. It was 3 years ago, early summer. I'd just barely scraped through a college semester with 3 incompletes and a caffeine habit that had me twitching, and my cousin Matt was coming off a brutal stint as a student teacher where one of his kids threw a desk. He needed to decompress. I needed to not be anywhere near a syllabus. So we made this loose plan, no real itinerary, just a stack of paper maps, a busted GPS, and a cooler with more beer than actual food. We decided we'd cut through the Appalachians, start in West Virginia, meander down through Virginia's Blue Ridge, hit North Carolina, then swing back. All back roads, no interstates. If we saw something interesting, we'd stop. If not, we'd keep going. The rules were no social media, no calling anyone unless it was an emergency, and no arguing about directions unless someone was about to drive us into a river. I pulled most of our points of interest from these weird old hiking forums. People just dropping comments like, found this trail where the trees don't grow right, or old mill site, no signal, spooky as hell, that kind of thing. Not even full posts, just fragments. The kind of stuff that makes you curious without really answering anything. By the second night, we were already a little gross. Hadn't showered, our food was mostly gas station junk, and we'd nearly nailed 2 deer within the same hour. We were somewhere south of Carver's Run. Tiny town, barely even had a sign, and east of nothing, like just forest and silence. Matt was driving when we passed this janky wooden sign, nailed to a crooked post. Faded writing in flaking white paint said, Burroughs Mill, to me. The arrow under it was snapped in half, just kind of hanging, like it couldn't be bothered to point anymore. We slowed down. No other cars, no houses, no mailboxes, no indication that anyone had lived out there in a long time. Matt looked at me. Want to check it out? I shrugged. Why not? We made the turn. The road was more like a trail. Gravel maybe, mostly dirt. Trees pressing in close, like they didn't get the memo that cars existed. Right around the first curve, we passed this rusted truck axle, half submerged in weeds, just the axle, no wheels, like someone left it as a warning decades ago. We didn't say anything, just kept driving. Eventually the trees opened up and we rolled into a clearing. What was left of Burroughs Mill was 2 buildings. One had collapsed completely, just a pile of shingles and rotted beams. The other one looked like a barn or an old warehouse. Long, leaning a bit, tin roof rusted in streaks. The wooden planks on the side were warped, like the whole thing had slouched over time. There were no paths, no signs of life, no fences, no driveway, just gravel and stillness. We parked a little ways off. I stretched out my legs and Matt lit a cigarette leaning against the hood. I told him I was going to take a look. He just nodded, like, you do you. The inside of the barn was dark but dry. Air smelled like dust and old rope. There were empty crates stacked haphazardly along the wall, coils of wire rusting in the corners, shelves half fallen in on themselves. A pulley system dangled from the ceiling, rope frayed but still hanging. Toward the back, I noticed a square cutout in the floor. A hatch. It looked heavy, but it wasn't locked. I gave it a tug, and the hinges groaned like they hadn't moved in years. Below was a staircase, just wood steps going straight down into the dark. I stepped back, walked to the entrance, and shouted for Matt. He flicked his cigarette into the dirt and joined me at the hatch. Are you serious? He said, looking down. I already had my flashlight in hand. Come on. I started down, and he followed after a second. The steps creaked but held. The basement was small. Stone walls, dirt floor, one thick post in the center. A few crates pushed into the corners, but the weird thing was the back wall. It didn't match the rest. Newer stones, tighter pattern, the mortar still had color. Like someone had rebuilt part of it more recently than the rest of the barn. Matt walked over and tapped it. It sounded solid. He pulled out his pocket knife and scraped at the seam between two stones. The mortar crumbled a little too easily. "This wasn't sealed that long ago," he said, frowning. I didn't touch it. Just stood there, breathing in air that felt wrong. Not moldy, not damp, just wrong. Like it had been sitting still for too long. Then we heard something upstairs, a soft bump, like wood shifting, or a crate tipping over slowly. We froze. Matt whispered, "Wind?" There was no wind, no draft. The hatch was still open above us. We didn't move. Just listened, nothing else. Eventually I shut off the flashlight and we climbed back up slow. The barn looked untouched, but I had that prickling feeling, like we weren't alone anymore, like the room still remembered us. We went back to the car. No one had driven in behind us. I checked. Still only our tracks. Matt lit another cigarette and didn't say anything for a while. Then he asked, "You want to just camp here?" It was late, no posted signs. Barn was dry and we hadn't passed anything better. We pitched the tent just beyond the clearing in a patch of grass that looked flat enough. Cooked up a couple cans of beans, had a couple beers, talked about stupid stuff. How one of his students kept calling him Matt Dad. The time I slipped during a freshman party and spilled nacho cheese on someone's laptop. But every few minutes, one of us would glance back toward the barn. We stopped mentioning it after a while. Like, if we didn't talk about it, it wouldn't matter. Around 1:30 a.m. we called it. Zipped up the tent and knocked out. Later I woke up needing to piss, couldn't ignore it. I unzipped the tent, barefoot, and walked maybe 20 feet into the grass. And I saw someone standing in the barn doorway. Not walking, not leaning, just standing, facing out toward the trees, completely still. I froze. One foot wet from dew, the other just barely grounded enough to stop me from running. I stared. The figure didn't move, not an inch. Then, slowly, it stepped backward. Not like someone turning and walking away, more like it was sliding back, just easing into the dark. Gone. I dropped into a crouch beside the tent. Stayed there, watching, waiting for it to come back out. Nothing. I slipped back inside, nudged Matt. "There's someone in the barn." He blinked at me like I was crazy, but then he saw my face and sat up without arguing. We packed in total silence, tent, stove, everything. At one point, Matt paused near a tree by the barn and squinted. "What is that?" There were handprints. Dark smears. About waist height. A little too fresh to be old, a little too dried out to be recent. 5 or 6 of them. Just there. We threw the rest of our gear in the car and peeled out. 2 miles back up the road, Matt adjusted the side mirror, then turned it all the way in. I asked, "What?" He didn't answer at first. Then he said, "Someone stepped onto the road, barefoot just behind us." We didn't stop, not for gas, not for food. We drove until the sun came up, then kept driving. When we finally found a main road, I tried pulling up Burroughs Mill on the GPS. Nothing. Later that week, I tried again with better reception. Still nothing. No town, no listing, not even coordinates. I searched for historical maps. Closest I found was a Burroughs Mill in Tennessee, burned down in 1921. Not even close to where we'd been. Matt and I don't talk about it anymore. If someone mentions the Appalachians, we both just kind of nod and change the subject. Last October, I convinced 2 of my closest friends, Connor and Ellie, to go camping with me deep in the Appalachian Mountains. Not your standard campsite with bathrooms and firewood bundles. I mean way out there, off-grid, no cell signal, barely a trail. I'd found the spot online, buried in an old comment thread on some backpacking forum. It wasn't even the main topic. Someone had asked about remote places in West Virginia, and one guy replied with a blurry photo and a 2-sentence description. It showed a rusted fire ring and a rotting bench surrounded by wood so thick the trees looked like they were fused together. He called it unlisted, untouched, nearly impossible to find. That's what sold it for me. I didn't want convenient. I wanted something different. We left on a Friday morning, just after sunrise. I drove. My beat-up Subaru Outback was the only one that could handle rough roads without crying. Connor sat up front. He gets carsick in the back, especially on winding roads. Ellie curled up in the back seat, cocooned in sleeping bags, passing snacks forward every so often. We had rules for the trip: no hotels, no phones after the trailhead, no checking in or posting anything, total disconnect, just woods, a campfire, and whatever we brought. It felt like a detox in a way. We were all burnt out from work, school, whatever else. The first few hours were easy. We got breakfast at this greasy diner just past Charleston. Ellie swears their hash browns changed her life. Then hit a small gas station off the highway where we stocked up on water and extra matches. Around 3, we started losing service. We didn't think much of it, just joked about how this was the last chance to send any if I go missing texts. When we reached the logging road that was supposed to lead to the campsite, it was already getting dark. My GPS gave up entirely. So I pulled out the printed directions. They were ridiculously vague, stuff like, turn left after mile marker 12, and look for a rusted signpost. No distances, no coordinates, just landmarks you'd miss if you blinked. We crawled up that gravel road at like 10 miles an hour. The path was so narrow that tree branches scraped the sides of the car. There were spots where the road dipped and filled with muddy water. At one point, we had to stop and drag a branch out of the way. No other cars, no signs of life. Just us, the trees, and whatever animals were keeping their distance. We made it to the site around 8:15. It looked just like the photo, except worse. The bench had collapsed on one end, the fire ring was full of old ash and damp leaves, and the trees boxed us in on 3 sides. Like the woods didn't want us there. The clearing was barely big enough for the tent. But we were tired, and it was late, so we set up quick. Ellie got the bourbon out, Connor passed around the sandwiches he'd made, and we sat around the fire trying to pretend we hadn't just driven 5 hours into the void. Once we settled in, it wasn't bad. The stars were out, the fire was warm, and nobody was checking their phones. For the first time in a while, we weren't being pulled in 100 directions. Just us. Around midnight, we started trading ghost stories. Dumb stuff. Connor told one about a haunted drive-in theater. Ellie made up something on the spot about a woman with backwards feet. I told an old sleep paralysis story from college. We were laughing more than we were scared. Then Ellie stopped mid-sentence. Her face went blank. She stared past me, toward the trees. Do you hear that? Connor and I went quiet. At first, there was nothing. Then, I heard it too. Faint, but there. Leaves crunching, twigs snapping, slow and steady. Not like an animal darting through. It was rhythmic. Footsteps. Pacing. Connor stood up fast and grabbed a flashlight. Probably a deer, he said. I wanted to believe that, but it didn't feel like an animal. The steps stayed just outside our firelight. Always the same distance. Around us, not toward us. Circling. We aimed our lights at the trees. The beams hit bark and branches, but no movement. Still, we kept hearing it, then it stopped. We sat like statues. I could feel the hair on my arms standing up. 10 seconds passed, then 20. No sound. Finally, Connor laughed nervously and said, "Okay, it's gone," and dropped another log on the fire. We tried to move on, sat a little closer to each other. The fire crackled and popped, but we didn't say much after that. Eventually, around 1:30, we climbed into the tent, zipped it up, tried to sleep. I woke up around 3 o'clock with that full bladder urgency you can't ignore. My phone was off, so I checked my watch. 3:03 exactly. I slipped out of my sleeping bag, unzipped the tent as quietly as I could, and stepped into the clearing. It was silent. Not late at night quiet. No crickets, no wind. Just nothing. I walked about 10 feet from the tent, took care of business, turned to head back, and stopped. Behind the bench, maybe 10 feet away, someone was standing. Tall, still, no light, no sound, just standing, watching. I froze. My hands went cold. I wanted to yell, but nothing came out. We just stood there, me and whoever or whatever it was. Then they stepped backward, not turned, just one slow step back into the trees. And they were gone. I sprinted for the tent, dove inside, and shook the others awake. "There's someone out there," I whispered. "By the bench." Connor grabbed the hatchet. Ellie grabbed her flashlight. We stepped outside together, circled the clearing. No footprints, no noise. The woods were as still as before. We didn't go back to sleep. We rebuilt the fire, sat around it until sunrise, barely speaking. At dawn, we packed up in record time. No one asked, should we stay? We all knew we were leaving. As we drove back, Connor scrolled through the photos on his phone. Most were blurry shots of us laughing around the fire. Then he stopped. "Look at this," he said. He showed me a photo he'd taken the night before. The fire pit was in the center, the bench in the background, and to the left of it, half in shadow, was a figure, still facing the camera. The exact spot I saw them later. Nobody had noticed it when he took the picture. The car stayed pretty quiet after that. A few nights later, Ellie called me. She said she'd been hearing footsteps outside her window. Slow ones, always after midnight, not fast like an animal, just pacing. Her bedroom's on the second floor. Then Connor texted. He said someone knocked on his apartment door at 3:03 a.m. He lives on the third floor, no stairs outside. When he looked through the peephole, no one was there. He opened the door, nothing. Checked the hallway, empty. And me? Thank God, I haven't seen anything. I was 22 when my friend Alex texted me that he had 2 weeks off and wanted to disappear for a bit. I was already throwing clothes into a backpack before he hit send. We didn't really make a plan. We just tossed some snacks, a dented cooler, a tent, and two $20 0-cent sleeping bags from a clearance bin into his old Honda Civic. It made this dying whine whenever he turned the key, like it was already regretting the trip. We left from Columbus with barely enough gas to reach Kentucky and figured we'd just drive south through the Appalachians, find trails, maybe hike a little if the mood struck. No reservations, no deadlines, just space. We were chasing that quiet you only find when your phone's dead and no one knows where you are. By the second day, we were well into the mountains. The farther we got, the more it felt like we'd dropped off the grid. Our phones gave up somewhere outside hazard, and GPS started flinching every time we hit another winding road. The highways turned into 2-lane strips, then gravel, the kind of roads that seemed surprised anyone still using them. We were relying on random road signs at that point, following anything that looked vaguely promising. Late that afternoon, we saw a wooden sign nailed to a tree. It looked like someone had made it in their garage 30 years ago. Crooked lettering, faded paint. It read, "Pine Loop, Trailhead, 3 miles." That was it. No arrow, no symbol, just those words. Alex pointed at it. "That could be something." I raised an eyebrow. "Could also be how people go missing in documentaries." He laughed. "Come on, it's probably just a fishing trail, locals and campfires. If it's sketchy, we bounce." We turned off onto this gravel path that clearly hadn't been maintained in years. Trees leaned in on both sides, thick enough to brush the mirrors. I kept waiting for a tire to blow or for us to end up stuck, but after a few slow, bumpy minutes, we rolled into a clearing. It was just a flat patch of packed dirt, like someone had driven in a circle 100 times. No signs, no markings. No other vehicle. And it was silent, not peaceful silence, just absence. Like the forest was on pause. We got out. Alex stretched and cracked his back like this was totally normal. He started grabbing stuff from the trunk while I stood there, still half expecting someone to pop out and tell us we were on private land. I followed him a little ways down the trail to see if it went anywhere. The path was narrow, more like a footpath than a real trail, winding into thick woods. Maybe 50 yards in, we hit a small bend with a patch of flat ground. Alex looked around, nodded like a contractor approving a blueprint, and started unpacking. I helped him pitch the tent while half watching the trees. The light was fading fast, and we didn't have much daylight left. I gathered twigs and dead branches and got a small fire going. Nothing impressive, just a few flickers for show. We sat by it for a while, not really talking. I was chewing beef jerky, and he was messing with his headlamp, cursing at the battery casing. I kept thinking about how weirdly quiet it was. No bugs, no rustling, just that dull snap of damp wood trying to burn. After a while, we crawled into the tent and zipped it up. I laid there staring at the ceiling, trying to feel tired. My stomach felt weird, tight, unsettled. I chalked it up to the jerky. Then we heard it. Something was moving through the brush. Not crashing, just moving, deliberate, slow. We both froze. I looked at Alex. His eyes were open. It wasn't constant, just a few soft steps. A pause, then another. Too spaced out to be a deer. Too quiet to be a bear. Then something cracked underfoot. Alex whispered, "Probably a raccoon." I didn't respond. Neither of us believed that. Eventually the noise stopped. We laid there stiff as boards for another 10 minutes before easing back down. I don't remember falling asleep. It was like I blinked and hours passed. Then I woke up. There was this sound. Slow, careful, a dragging scrape along the outside of the tent. Not random, not like wind or leaves. It started at the back corner and slid all the way across toward the zipper. I couldn't move. My eyes were wide open, heart thudding like it was trying to punch through my chest. It went around the tent once, then again, same rhythm. Then it stopped. Everything went still. And then something pressed in right in front of my face. I could see it, outlined in the pale light leaking through the nylon. A head, a human-shaped head, just pressing in, not moving, not breathing, just there. I reached for my flashlight with hands that barely worked. Clicked it on and aimed straight ahead. Nothing, just smooth tent wall, clean. Empty. I turned and shook Alex hard. He groaned, rolled toward me. "What, there was someone outside?" I whispered. He sat up so fast he nearly smacked into the ceiling. "What? Right here. I saw it. A face." He didn't argue, just unzipped the tent and stuck his head out with the flashlight. Then he said, "Where's the car?" At first I thought he meant like, where in the clearing? Then I looked out too. The Honda was gone. Not crashed, not moved, just gone. No tracks, no debris, just a flat rectangle of dirt where it had been. We both just stood there, blinking, trying to process. Then Alex said, "We're leaving." We broke camp faster than I thought possible. Didn't talk, just stuffed everything into our packs, left the firewood, didn't even try to fold the tent. We started back down the trail with the flashlight bouncing ahead, but everything looked different. The trail was wider. The trees looked taller. I kept turning around to check behind us, half expecting to see someone following. I didn't. Then we reached a bridge. We had not crossed a bridge coming in. It was small, old, barely holding together, planks missing. The stream underneath was maybe knee-deep. We walked out onto it. Alex stopped, halfway. "There's something in the water," he said. I followed his light. There, in the stream, was a man, face down, 1 foot bare, flannel shirt torn at the shoulder. His arms were stretched in front of him like he'd been crawling and just gave up. "Is he alive?" I whispered. Alex leaned down. "Hey, you okay?" Then the man snapped upright, sat straight up, no effort, no transition, just vertical in a blink. His head turned, slowly. His eyes caught the flashlight and reflected it back, pale and flat. They didn't blink. Alex dropped the flashlight. We bolted, off the trail, into the trees. I didn't care what direction, just away. Branches whipped my arms. I tripped, caught myself, kept going. I could hear something crashing behind us. It didn't matter. Eventually, we broke into another clearing. A cabin stood there, small, 1 window glowing faintly. No car, no generator, hum. Just a cabin. We ran up. Pounded on the door. No answer. I grabbed the knob. It turned. We stepped in. It was empty. No furniture, bare walls, nothing but dust and old wood, except for one thing. On the far wall, carved deep into the wood, was a list of names. Dozens. Some were slashed through, others were clean. Recent. At the bottom, in shaky cuts, was Alex's full name. He backed up like he'd been punched. Then the door behind us creaked. We turned. Outside the window, maybe 15 feet away, stood the man from the stream, staring, still. We didn't speak. We just ran. Out the back, through the trees, back into the dark. We didn't stop until we hit asphalt. We walked until sunrise. The pickup finally pulled over. The driver gave us water, didn't ask questions. Took us to a town 20 miles out. We went to the sheriff, told him everything. He listened. Then asked where the cabin was. We couldn't tell him. 2 days later, they found the car, parked neat at the edge of a ravine 30 miles away. Key still in it. No sign of a break-in. They said it was probably a prank. Alex moved to Colorado not long after. My name's Matt. I was 23 and floating, kind of stuck in that weird space after community college where everything's possible, but nothing feels right. I didn't have a job lined up, no clear next step, just this low-level itch that something needed to happen, even if I didn't know what. So when my friend Chris tossed out the idea of a road trip through the Appalachians, I didn't think. I just said, yeah. When do we leave? He'd been talking about it for months. Scenic routes, old diners, weird roadside stuff. Views so massive, they'd make all your problems feel smaller. That sounded good to me. I wasn't looking for anything deep. I just wanted out for a while. We packed light but messy. Chris had this ancient Toyota Corolla that somehow still ran, so we shoved in our backpacks an old tent that smelled like pine needles and mildew, a cooler filled with beef jerky, energy drinks, a whole loaf of bread for some reason, and way too many bottles of water. No itinerary, no hotel bookings, just a GPS set to scenic route and a vague sense of direction. That kind of aimlessness felt exciting, like we were pulling away from gravity. Day one, the world just kind of opened up. Pennsylvania farmland faded behind us and turned into these endless green hills. We pulled over every chance we got. Once to see a two-headed calf floating in a jar, being shown off by a guy in overalls like it was his family heirloom. Once to buy a piece of petrified wood from a woman who insisted it cured migraines. I hadn't laughed like that in months. Like real, full-body laughter that caught me off guard. We ended up that night outside a town called Winslow Gap. Never heard of it before, haven't found it since. The sign welcoming us looked hand-painted and kind of crooked. Right past it was a diner squished into what used to be a gas station, advertising authentic home-style biscuits. We went in, obviously. Inside, it was dim but homey. Booths with duct tape over the tiers, photos of people we didn't recognize pinned to a corkboard by the door. The woman working there wore a floral apron and had this friendly, worn-in look, like she'd been serving coffee since the 70s. We asked about camping spots, and she smiled, like we'd just asked her favorite subject. She said, "Old Briar Road's real quiet. Local kids steer clear, but you boys might like it." She gave this little nod like it was a tip, not a warning. We probably should have read it the other way. Old Briar Road wasn't on Google Maps. We found it after circling twice. Just a thin gravel strip cutting into dense woods. No signs, no lights. We followed it until a small clearing opened up, surrounded by trees on every side. No cell service, no sound, just stillness. We pitched the tent, laughed about how dark it got, and passed out early. But that night felt off. It wasn't anything obvious, just this oppressive quiet. No crickets, no wind, nothing. I woke up sweating, even though it wasn't hot out. My sleeping pad felt damp. I unzipped the tent for water just to cool down, and that's when I heard it. One crunch. Just one. Like a footstep on dry leaves. Then a soft scrape brushed the side of the tent. Not like an animal. Too slow, too smooth. Like fingers dragging across canvas. I froze. My mouth went dry. I whispered, "Chris?" But got nothing back, just the same silence pressing in. I crept out barefoot, stood there in the moonlight, trying to convince myself it was a squirrel or the wind. Circled the tent slowly. Nothing moved. 10 minutes passed, maybe more. I crawled back in, heartbeat too loud in my ears to sleep. We didn't talk about it the next morning. We just packed up fast and got back on the road. I didn't mention the noise, didn't want to spook him, or maybe myself. Days 2 and 3, we fell into a rhythm. Windy roads, gas stations with faded Coke signs, motels where you had to jiggle the key just right to get the door to lock. We stopped at every scenic overlook, took pictures we never looked at again, sat on benches with our gas station coffee, pretending not to notice how quiet everything still felt. Chris made a few jokes about how I'd turned into paranoid camp guy, but I noticed he stopped leaving the motel room without checking the locks twice. I also noticed people staring. Not everyone, just enough, at a convenience store in a place called Hollow Creek. I saw this man sitting on a bench across the street. He looked about 70, maybe older, and just stared. Eyes wide, not blinking. I looked away, then back, still staring. Unmoving. Like he was watching a threat, not a person. I told Chris. He tried to brush it off, but his laugh was thin, forced. We left that town fast, no argument. Day 4, Chris wanted to check out a trailhead that supposedly had a killer overlook. GPS gave out halfway up the road and we ended up lost. Again. The road ended at a shack that looked like it had been split open by time, half rotted. Behind it was a wooden frame, 4 posts and a crossbeam. A rope dangled from it, swaying a little. Frayed, stained, clearly old. It wasn't tied into a full noose, but it didn't have to be. I just said, "Okay, nope." Chris nodded. "Yeah, let's get out of here." We didn't say much the rest of the drive. Ended up at a family-run motel that had actual door chains and real curtains. Felt like a luxury. That night, I woke up at 3 a.m. to knocking. Not frantic or loud, just steady, deliberate. Knock, pause, knock. It was coming from the hallway door. Chris stirred across the room. Another knock. This time, it was at the window next to my bed. I froze under the blanket like I was 6 years old. Chris turned the lamp on, sat up, and just looked at me. "Was that you?" I shook my head. We didn't move for the next hour, just listened. Nothing else happened. Eventually, the silence got heavy again, and we drifted into this uneasy half-sleep. Next morning, over cheap coffee and burnt toast, I told Chris everything. About the rope structure, the knocking, the feeling like something was following us just out of sight. He didn't laugh this time, just nodded and said, "We're going home." No detours, no scenic routes, just highways. Day 6, we stopped for gas in Virginia. I walked inside and saw a corkboard next to the bathrooms. It was covered with missing person flyers. Kids, hikers, young adults. Some recent, some clearly old. One of them caught my eye. A boy, maybe 12, curly hair and a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. I stared at it too long. Something about his face made my stomach flip. Like I'd seen it before. Not in person, in a diner maybe, or a roadside stop. When I got back to the car, Chris was already pale and tense. He didn't say anything, just pulled out of the lot fast. That afternoon, the Corolla started making this grounding sound. Chris pulled over on a cliffside stretch of road, no guardrails, just trees and drop-offs. I joined him at the hood, trying to look useful. That's when I heard it again. Dry leaves crunching, slow, deliberate steps. Not close, but getting closer. I looked up, scanned the tree line, saw a flicker of movement, a shape between the trunks. Gone before I could focus. Chris didn't even ask, just slammed the hood and said, "Get in." We drove 10 miles with the hazard lights blinking, engine whining, silence heavy between us. That night we splurged on a chain hotel, one with real lobbies, bright hallways, security cameras. We kept the lights on. Slept in our clothes, shoes by the door, keys in hand. I unpacked the tent when I got home, scrubbed every inch. Didn't help.